Hey everyone, welcome to a brand new season, or should I say episode of Film Talk with Jordan Ramirez. And today we have a very special guest. He is a broadcaster and he is an American radio host and creative services producer in Waco, Texas. And he is the host of Live and Amplified. Of course, that's on his Instagram profile. Please welcome to the show, Tom Kwiat.
Quiet.
Tom
Yeah.
Kwiat.
Yep.
Okay. Now, the film that Tom has chosen for today's episode is Mr. Holland's Opus, released in 1995 and starring Richard Dreyfuss, Glenne Headly, William H. Macy, and of course, Olympia Dukakis. Now, Tom, what we usually do on our show is we ask the viewers, or in this case, the guests, some questions. So, the first question that I want to ask is, when did you first see this film, and why do you consider this one of your favorites?
I first saw this film when I was a little kid, so uh night late or well, it came out in late 95, so it was probably like early 96 when it was put out onto like the pay-per-view. You remember back in the day when DirecTV used to be able to like buy the movies and all that stuff? That
Yeah,
was
I
the
do.
first time that I watched it. And Yeah, I just remember being a little kid. It was always my dad's kind of choice to at what movie we'd watch on a Thursday night or a Friday night, whatever it is. And
Mm.
he always had like this really cool taste in movies. And it was one of those movies that I watched then and then I'd watch periodically as I grew up. And then once I started exploring like music just in general, I started watching that film a lot more. And as I started growing up, so it just kind of worked its way into one of my favorite movies. It was actually quite funnily enough, it's in my top five like best movies of all time.
That's interesting. So do you have any connection with the character of Glenn Holland in the film or any of the other characters in the movie?
I mean, I have at different phases in my life. I've connected with different parts or different characters within the movie. Like more recently, obviously, as I get older, I'm 36 right now,
Mm.
and so like the Glenn Holland character is very interesting to me right now. So the last few times that I've watched the movie, I've started, like really understanding some of the struggles that he was going through. But obviously, as like a younger kid, I really enjoyed the character that Terrence Howard plays, which I didn't realize he was actually in the film until like a few years back.
Yeah, it was my first time rewatching it and yeah, not noticing he was in this film, but
Yeah, it was so. But I definitely resonated with his character. It's like he's trying to find his way. He's trying to kind of find his thing, and then there's like a teacher that obviously Mr. Holland kind of sheds some light and some companionship and some guidance. And there's that connectivity, and like that was definitely a journey that I went through. Not necessarily in high school, but it was like grade school, in college, and so I definitely those were like the two big characters that I kind of connected to.
mm. So yeah, I did remember watching that sequence because when I've rewatched it again, because I know this is one of my sister's favorite films,
Mm.
because she also has a passion for music and she graduated with a degree in music, and she played clarinet like, oh my gosh, the character who later became the governor in
Oh, Gertrude Lang.
yeah, Gertrude Lang, who later became the governor at the end of the film. Sorry for spoiling for those who have not seen it. uh,
Luckily, it's not a pivotal point in the movie. It's just kind of like one of those little extra, like, oh, okay, I see what you did there.
yeah, exactly. But yeah, I do remember watching this film, and at the time I never understood it. But now that I had rewatched it, it is basically when I saw it, it almost felt like a biopic based on somebody who did exist, even though he's a fictitious character.
Yeah,
And it does work in that structure because in the opening of the film we have Mr. Holland. He's playing on his piano, and I think he was trying to write his opus because
yeah,
originally he took the teaching job so that he could get the money to pay for this
yeah,
to get the money for his opus. And when he started to realize that the students in his class were I remember this one scene in the film, and I think I have it, that he didn't like his students, he didn't like the principal, and at first he hated this job position.
Yep. Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, as you mentioned, he started to become more like a mentor or somebody who was helping students out. It started to grow on him, and I think he started to abandon his mission of creating the Opus, or maybe it came a little bit later as the story progressed.
Now, I don't think he abandoned the Opus because obviously, as you watch throughout the movie, the Opus is kind of being slowly built and they end up performing it at the end. So I think it goes without saying that he was working on it, but not as much as he wanted to.
Mhm.
And it's just one of the main connective tissues of the film that I really enjoy is when you're young, you kind of have these grand ideas of, oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to be this, I'm going to do everything I can to be, like whatever your dream is. But as you grow, as life kind of changes, obviously they were a young married couple at the beginning, they have a kid, and it's like, okay, well, I guess I got to go teach summer school.
Yeah.
Oh, we need to get a house, more, so, just so like as life kind of goes, your priorities change. And it's not that your goal changes, it's your priority changes. Your what you want to be doing versus you just what you want to be doing kind of changes. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It does have that effect, but some of the moments that I put down, besides that, he mentioned that he there was a scene where he mentioned, I think, to the coach in the movie, who later became his best friend, that before he took this job, he was originally performing in clubs. He performed at weddings, bar mitzvahs. So they were like traveling musicians, and I remember there was another scene when the coach asked him if he used to chase girls around, and he said, "That was the old me. Now I'm a married man and I have a kid, and I don't do that stuff anymore," which I thought was pretty interesting.
yeah, that was a interesting point in the movie. And because I rewatched it this morning just to kind of have it fresh in the back of my mind because it's been
Mm,
like a month or two since I had seen it last.
yeah.
And so I was just watching it this morning, and for whatever reason, that one part just like really like I've seen the movie hundreds of times, and for whatever reason, that moment you just brought up, I was like, huh, that's funny. I've never caught that one before. So
Yeah. But yeah, that was something that I had to catch up on because, as I said, it's been years since I last
hmm,
saw it. And I do remember when he starts teaching his class, the students, when he's trying to teach them about music, it's almost like they're non-responsive.
hmm,
They only think about like what they know about music. But then later, as he starts to connect, he says, what if we take this music by Johann Sebastian Bach and then we connect it to jazz, or we connect
hmm,
it to rock and roll, which is
yeah,
basically the connection. And of
hmm,
course, Vice Principal Walter is played by William H. Macy, and I always view him as he's sort of like the primary antagonist of the
hmm,
story because he claims he loves classical music, but I think he's more using it as an excuse to not understand the arts, is how I conceived of it as I watched this film again.
yeah. It's one of those things like that. Like I understand his position. Obviously, as we get older, we understand like finances and all that stuff. But I think William H. Macy's character, Principal Walters, or I guess early on in the movie, it was Vice Principal Walters.
Mm-hmm.
He kind of represents in a very loose way the responsibilities of being an adult. Like,
Mm-hmm.
yes, it's this cool idea of, do what you want, dream big, go after these things. But at the end of the day, you've got bills you got to worry about. You've got like all these things. So it's kind of just like on a super deep level, it's kind of Mr. Holland represents dreams and aspirations and all these things you have as a kid, while uh, William H. Macy's character kind of represents responsibilities and being an adult. So
Mm,
it's like that surface, or that below the surface kind of conflict right there, is a very interesting part of the movie that I think a lot of people kind of overlook.
mm-hmm. That's also something that's maybe I overlooked it when I was younger, but rewatching it now, it does make sense when you put it that way. But I also liked that as he was trying to teach music to his students and he's trying to make sure that they know about music, he also tries to put in like I remember the moment that he realized that his son was born deaf. He tried to make the connection between Beethoven, the composer, like how he
Yep.
could not hear music, to the situation with his own son. Like, how could he hear music when he can't? Which I
Hmm.
thought was very deeply emotional and personal.
Yeah, it was an interesting part of the movie because, like, I mean, trying to, and I think that's kind of what his success as a teacher kind of all hinged on, was him being able to personally connect to the music and find a way to portray that to the kids. And
Mm-hmm.
the fact that his son was born deaf, just like on the surface level,
Mm-hmm.
it's like you can kind of tell that's going to be, or you'd think that that would be the main friction point throughout the film. And for the most part, it is, but it's also kind of, not to spoil anything, but it's also kind of the thing that brings them together at the end. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
talking about Mr. Holland and his son, Cole.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Absolutely. But I did like in the film Principal Jacobs. I think I
yep.
might have okay. Principal Jacobs, played in the film by Olympia Dukakis. I like her in other roles, but I thought she was great as the principal in this film because she was like the one person whom he relied on that would save the arts and the music programs that he was a part of, and she was very supportive. And this was like early in the film before I think it was around the time that the kids were graduating in like the I think it was like around 65, 66, or somewhere in that timeline,
Yeah.
that she announced her retirement, and then Walters took over as the principal,
Yeah.
which I thought was like, you lost your ally and now you have to find a way to go around it, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I 100% agree. It was I think you're right. I think it was 65. It's weird kind of how they break up the movie in decades, but it's also kind of one of the charming points. But
Mm-hmm.
I think you're right. I think it was right around 65, maybe 70, but you know.
Yeah, it could be because if I remembered, it was around the time that the Vietnam War was starting, and it was just at the beginning of the 1970s decade. And the way that the passage of time is depicted in this film is they use montage of like different clips from like the whatever decade the story is supposed to be set in, and they
Mhm.
would always play an appropriate music for the background, I guess, to represent what the decade was like.
Yeah. This is a movie of montages. I think
Mm-hmm.
last I counted, what was there, like six montages? I obviously in between each
Mm-hmm.
deck, or like time passage from decade to decade, but
Mm-hmm.
I want to say there was like at least six montages. So
I believe there was, because I think when the story progresses from the 70s to the 1980s decade, it you just see like footage of him taking another position as I think it was like a test driver, like a driving instructor,
yep,
and
there, yeah,
they repeated that for like the moments when we transition from the 70s up into the 80s decade.
yeah,
And you notice how in the film, as time passes, you notice how the clothing changes, how the cars change, and also the characters in the film, they get a little bit older, especially
mm,
Mr. Holland and his wife. And also, the only decade I noticed that doesn't have that passage was the 1990s decade, from the 80s to the 90s. I think that was the only one that didn't have it. It was like we approached the end of the 80s and then boom, we're in the 90s. That
yep.
was something I know.
It was kind of like a hard transition, which I like. Look, I don't mind, because to kind of piggyback off what you were talking about, how it shows like throughout the entire film, the montages are kind of that, um, the gradual showing of clothes changing and people getting older, all that fun stuff. But what I really caught um more recently as I watched the film is the entire movie seems to be an interesting character study about the change in society.
Hmm.
Like and it's just very subtle type stuff, but like you look at like when they were in the 60s, 50s and 60s and stuff like that, it's very community oriented, very family, very, and like there was a lot of respect between the teachers and the students,
Hmm.
and then it kind of gradually changes as you go throughout time. And then once you get to the 90s, you can kind of tell like everybody's a little bit more self-absorbed, everybody's kind of worried about themselves and not, you know
Hmm.
like worried. It's not as community based, you know what I'm
No.
saying? So
Yeah, yeah. Pretty much. But yeah, you do say, I did like that idea that I never thought of it that way before. But I do remember this is like the 80s period in the story when Mr. Holland and his co-teacher, I don't remember what the other co-teacher's name is. Anyway,
uh bill Bill Meister, that's what his name.
Bill Meister.
Yeah.
I remembered it was just around the time that Principal Walters was about to cut the budget, and they had to figure out which classes they had to to take out. And then the Mr. Holland and the other teacher, they decided to put on a review of George and Ira Gershwin,
Yep.
and the music of George and Ira Gershwin, and it was going to be like just like a review where you had
Yep.
like little sketches based on the songs of the famous brothers. Um, and I do remember the one moment when they were auditioning for different students to be in the play. One of the students who had a beautiful voice ended up getting one of the parts, and I don't know if it was like part of the subplot where she was where he started seeing her and he was helping her practice, and it felt like it was like a sort of mini love triangle, I guess. I don't know if that was part of this plot or of the subplot or anything.
It's definitely hinted at. It's I think she thinks there's like a romantic interest there, but I think he sees it more as, oh, this is me 20 years ago.
Mm.
Like this is like all the talent in the world, all the aspirations in the world. And then when she says, "Hey, I'm going to New York,
Hmm.
um, come with me and accompany me," that's
Hmm.
kind of like, and was hoping you'd kind of bring this up because, like, I feel like this whole scene with the Gershwin review
Hmm.
is like, to me, it's like a whole pivotal scene of the film because it's kind of that moment where he realizes, oh, my dreams and aspirations have changed. What I wanted 15 years ago aren't necessarily what I want now. And it's depicted through this whole relationship with Rowena,
Hmm.
where she invites him to go to New York and he decides not to go because to me, at least to me, it represents his opportunity to go pursue what he wants to do, which is write and compose and play music.
Yeah, exactly. That's that was something that I picked up too as I watched that sequence. She did have aspirations and dreams about
Yeah.
going to places, and he had a duty to teach, and he just didn't feel like it was something he wanted to do at the moment.
Yeah.
Which I think is also the part of the responsibility factor in the story because
Yeah.
he's married and he has a child, and it's not good for him to go on this pursuit.
Right.
But yeah, so that was something that I also like that I also wanted to bring up. Um, so now there's another question I wanted to ask. Besides the question I asked you about the relationship, like asking you if there was a connection, did you have any chance, did you by chance know anybody who had seen the film or maybe had been a part of the film that you can relate, that you could share, or maybe not really?
Um, Not really, because like, I mean, there's the magic to the film to me was for the longest time, I didn't know how popular this film was. I just thought it was like a one-off film.
Mm-hmm.
And Richard Dreyfuss has always kind of been a really interesting actor to me because, like, I mean, he doesn't do a whole lot. Like, you go and look at like The Rock or Kevin Hart or like any of these big name actors, and they're doing 3, 4, 5 film projects a year.
Mm-hmm.
Richard Dreyfuss has really never done that. He'll like, so when he's in a film, he it's because he wants to be there or there's something special to him about this film, and that's kind of always been really interesting to me. And so like Richard Dreyfuss is just one of these actors that I don't know a whole lot about, like as far as like personal life and stuff, but when I see
Mm-hmm.
him act and in a film, it's like this guy knows what he's doing.
Mm-hmm. I do. I mean, I think one of my favorite performance. Well, this was in his younger days. I think one of my
Yeah.
favorite performances of his was, besides this film, he did a movie called The Goodbye Girl with Marsha Mason back in the
Mm.
70s, for which he won an Oscar at the age of 30, which I thought was pretty interesting. And then, people would also think about like American Graffiti or
Mm.
Jaws or maybe Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which was released the same year
Yeah.
that he won an Oscar. Those types of movies in which he excelled at his depth, and maybe other lesser known films or maybe big films that he made that I thought were pretty interesting as well.
Yeah.
But he's a very complex actor. He could do drama, he could do comedy, he could play all types of characters that I always thought were interesting. And as you mentioned that he's not doing a lot lately, I do find this to be true, because as you get older, the offers don't come up as often as you would hope they would be. But I thought he was a great actor too,
Hmm.
and I still think he is.
Yeah. He's definitely you know, one of my favorite actors. And then just like you look at the lineup for this film in general, and it's like a young Terrence Howard, like we talked about it earlier, but
Mm-hmm.
the young Terrence Howard, and it's like this was before anybody like was this one of his first? It had to be one of his first films, but
Um, so I looked this up, and I think I remembered I saw this. His actual first appearance was in a mini series about the Jackson Five back in
okay.
1992. So,
Um,
um, and around the time he also did Dead Presidents,
mhm.
by Albert Hughes. So,
Yeah.
he was still getting there.
Yeah, he was working his way. He was working his way to where he is now, and so just like you see, kind of this interesting like lineup of actors. We've gone over it a couple times already, but just
Mm-hmm.
the entire film, like that's just what draws me into the film. Is it's like you got young actors that are still acting to today, and then
Mm-hmm.
even at the time you had seasoned actors like Richard Dreyfuss, and then William H. Macy. He was there. Like I don't remember exactly where he was at in his career at that time, but like I mean, he was still a pretty big name.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then so yeah.
Yeah. Well, the other film that I think other viewers may remember him was the next year he appeared in the movie Fargo,
Hmm.
which was sort of like a big hit. Him and Olympia Dukakis, another one of my favorites, who I remembered I saw her in Moonstruck from the 80s. She was in Look Who's Talking and Away From Her and all those types of movies where she did both comedy and drama, like I mentioned for the other actors. And there were not so she was kind of well known. Glenne Headly,
Hmm.
who recently passed away in 2017. I only knew her from watching a show called Monk, where she
Hmm.
played Captain Stottlemeyer's ex-wife on the show. And the other was, oh my gosh, I forgot the actor who played the coach in the film, but
Jay Jay
oh, Jay
was
Thomas. Yeah, Jay
yep. Okay.
Thomas. Yeah. I don't know if he was a comic or he was like a movie.
He was a radio host. Like
Oh,
yeah.
no, no, go ahead. Go ahead. What were you gonna
No,
say?
it was Jay, he was a radio host.
Oh, he
That's
was.
yeah.
Oh, okay. That's good to know, because I was unfamiliar with his other work, but it's interesting to know some of the actors in this movie, which I thought were really good.
Yeah, I always feel bad because anytime somebody brings up Jean Headley to me, I only know her from Sergeant Bilko, which was a
Okay.
Steve Martin movie from the 90s. And it's like she was like the main motivator in that movie, but it's like that's probably not a movie she wanted to be remembered for. But I mean, I
No.
guess at the end of the day, it's like, okay. So
No, I mean, I liked her acting in this film because before I was unsure of where I seen her from, and then I remembered I had to look her up, and then
mhm.
I looked at some of her credits, and I'm like, okay, now I know who she is because maybe I've seen her from this program or this movie or whatever. But yeah, that was something I wanted to bring up. I liked the fact that, as you mentioned, you have seasoned actors and you had up and coming actors, so it felt like, as you said, it felt more like a character drama, and it didn't feel like, well, besides the big box office draw of the
Yeah,
Mr. Richard Dreyfuss,
yeah.
it almost felt like a character drama film
Mhm.
as you watch it from beginning to end. It didn't feel like uh I know that it was made by Hollywood Pictures, which was a division of Disney. Um, but I always find it an interesting film that came from a Disney property, of course.
Yeah. It and I didn't know it was a Disney property until I saw it on Disney Plus a couple of months back, and I was like, "Oh, okay, I guess that makes sense." So, yeah.
Yeah, it does. I mean, of course. But yeah, I as you mentioned, the character drama is good in this film. The writing is also good in this film as well as the direction, and also the production design and the score, and the costuming as well. So there are a lot of things that one can talk about in this film. But again, I'm not trying to talk about the technical
Yeah.
details of this film, which I thought it's like if I don't know who worked on what, I just felt like I don't want to focus too much on that.
Yeah, for sure. What I do like about you brought it up was the screenwriting. Like it was just like to have the mind to write a film and think whether they're thinking about it or it just kind of naturally progressed the way the film did. Like, I don't know. What the screenwriting on this film was amazing. So,
It is. Um, but yeah, so another thing I wanted to ask you about, do you think you've seen other films that feel similar to this story, like films are that could be talking about composers or music or conductors, or maybe films that are like on a biographical basis?
I mean, like thinking about it over the last couple of weeks, because I was trying to think about it because I love this movie so much. I was like, I'm kind of interested to see what would be something similar.
Hmm.
And I sat down to watch um oh,
Mm-hmm.
what was it? Almost Famous. Yep. I don't know why that took me so long to come out
Okay.
with.
Uh,
I was
uh, no, go ahead.
no, and so like I just feel like it's a different movie, obviously, but like I was picking up a lot of the same themes of growing up, chasing after your dreams, but growing up, and it was like the same kind of battle of the young kid that was the writer.
Mm-hmm.
He was kind of chasing after his dreams while his mother represented kind of the nope, you got to be responsible, you got all these responsibilities, so I kind of was picking up the same theme throughout that entire film.
That's interesting. So, excuse me. So when I was watching this film, the only films that I could think of that would be sort of related, and this is just me personally,
Mhm.
they would be like, and this is just my recommendations, The Piano Teacher or The Audition, or a movie I really wanted to see very much, Tar, starring Kate Blanchett, which
Mm.
is an interesting story, but it's basically about a female conductor and how she is a very complicated, and it's a very complex story. I heard it was like over 2 hours long, almost
Yeah.
3 hours. But those are just some of my recommendations of like if it were like on a double bill with any of those pictures.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, I'll definitely check those out. I'm no, I haven't seen The Pianist. I was supposed to, but I didn't. I didn't get a chance to see it. So,
Okay. So yeah. so we're almost running out of time. So before we end this show, and I know we had discussed mostly about the story and about some of the actors in this film, as well as the music. And what did we discuss about the music, or not as much?
I mean, the music is there, and that was kind of the I just to kind of touch on it. Like it's a pivotal point because obviously that's kind of the connective tissue between kind of every like the transformation of time, just kind of there.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a movie about life, and it just uses music kind of as the catalyst for it.
Mm.
So
Okay. Okay then. So before we have 8 minutes left. So anyway, so before we move on, a couple of more questions. So do you have any last statements or maybe some last thoughts about this movie that you want to talk about? Uh,
no, I think we've talked about it pretty, like I've gotten everything off my chest. It's to me, it's just a great movie. I really enjoy it. The pivot, like I mentioned before, the pivotal scene with Rowena. Yep, that's her
mhm.
name.
Yeah.
And just like it's a good movie all around. So
No, yeah. Okay, I'll mention this before we run out of time. The moment when when he coaches for, well, not coaches, when he leads the marching band, because I remembered Vice Principal Walters asked him if he ever headed a marching band before, and so there's a scene where he's trying to lead the marching band, and as we mentioned before, we are introduced to the character of was his name Russ in the movie, or
yep,
Russell? Okay,
yep.
Russ. And because he had never played an instrument before, he asked him what type of instruments he would like to play, and he said guitar. And I remembered long to do that, and of course he asked him to do a tuba, and I think that his response was, I think I might quote it here: "Tubas are for fat kids with pimples,"
Yep.
which which I remember. And then he said, "How do you feel about a drum?" A drum. And then they started rehearsing, because at first he couldn't get the rhythm and the beat of the drum, because I sort of I'm not musically I'm not a sort of music person. I try to read music. I'm not that talented at music. But I could sort of relate to having all the noise interrupt my flow of having to get on the beat. Is so that was something that I liked about that sequence, him teaching him how to use the drum. So I thought it would bring up the marching band sequence and him teaching how to use the drum,
Mhm.
just for the last thought, which I thought was pretty interesting.
Yeah, for sure. That was definitely a cool part of the movie. So
Yeah. Um, and I also wanted to relate to that because my sister did end up in a marching band, and it was amazing. I got to see her when she was in middle and high school, performing clarinet for the marching band for her high school team, for whatever high school team they were performing. So I thought I would just bring that up to any marching band fans or somebody who has been a member of a marching band out there.
mhm.
Maybe I would give them a shout out.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, because it's also part of the story and it's part of the narrative. Okay, so we also mentioned some of the recommendations that I pointed out. But because I'm sort of a Cole Porter fan, I thought I would bring up The Lovely. It's with Kevin Kline, and it's basically about the story of Cole Porter, from his humble beginnings till I guess the 1960s when he passed away. So I thought I would bring that up as a recommendation as well. So The Lovely, starring Kevin Kline, from 2004. For those who have never seen it, go check it out. It's really amazing.
Yeah. I'm definitely gonna add it to my list. So
Okay, so thank you so much. And before we end the show, so where can my listeners find you, and can you where can what show can they know about? So that's the plug-in.
yep, awesome. Gotcha. So you can find me at live or so I host a show called the Live and Amplified Indie Fusion Podcast. We interview independent musicians, kind of going through the creative process and their struggles in the industry. So you can find us on all social medias at live, the letter N amplified. So that's Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, all the fun stuff. And we're doing the podcast. We got some videos that we do. and we're working on some cool documentaries and stuff of that nature. So yeah.
Okay. Oh, okay. Thank you so much. All right. So this is Jordan Ramirez, and we have just been talking with our brilliant friend, with our brilliant guest on the program, Tom Kwiat. And as he mentioned, you can listen to his podcast on, can you repeat those platforms
Uh,
again?
yeah, it's on the podcast is on Spotify. So the Live and Amplified Indie Fusion podcast.
Okay. Thank you so much. And this is Jordan Ramirez signing off, and we hope to see you again. And thank you, Tom, for being part of the podcast episode. And it was a great recommendation, and I enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, and yeah, thank you so much for being on the show, and I hope we can see each other soon.
Yep.
Okay,
Same.
thank
Same.
yeah,
Same.
okay, thank you so much. Thank you for being on the podcast.